Welcome to Cash Talk, the podcast where we delve into the depths of finance, business, and life itself. I'm your host, John Cachia, a multi-award-winning wealth advisor with a passion for empowering ambitious Australians to confidently achieve financial freedom. Hey everyone, before we get started, this is a quick reminder that everything in this podcast is of a general nature and nothing has been tailored to your personal circumstances. So please seek personal financial advice before acting on this information. And welcome back to Cash Talk. And today I'm joined by Anthony. Anth, how are you, mate?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm actually feeling a little bit weird because we've changed seats. For so many episodes, I've been sitting on that side of things, but I thought I'd mix it up, you know. So besides the change in seats, good. Kids are well. It's a bit cold in Melbourne, but besides that, everything's good. What about your side?
It's been freezing.
Yeah.
So just trying to keep warm.
That's it. But you're heading away.
Yeah, heading away to the US for 4 weeks. So late honeymoon, waited for end of financial year to be done because that's always hectic. But now finally heading off.
And where are you going in the US?
Yeah, starting at Hawaii, going to LA, Vegas, Miami, and New York.
And so you're the type that like has everything planned out, and then your wife comes along, or is it?
Everything's all in the spreadsheet, ready to go. where we're going, what's booked. It's holiday planning is my forte, so I get that under control.
But I must admit I'm a bit the same, and but I enjoy it. I think you're the same.
Yeah, no, I like to make sure like we're able to do everything we want to do, what makes logical sense from walking distance, doing things in the right order. So and making sure that we don't miss a lot of the stuff, like we've been watching videos and reading things about all the stuff we want to do. So for us, it's important that we don't miss anything. And I feel like that's the best way to make sure nothing doesn't get missed.
Is there any surprises on the honeymoon that your wife doesn't know about?
Nothing surprised. Coming up, she knows everything. She's got access to the Google sheet, so she can see what's coming.
Oh, I tried. Okay, so if she's watching or listening, but today we want to kind of really delve into families and some of the questions sometimes we get asked, some of the questions that we don't get asked, but you know we want to really kind of get into the world of young families and what they're thinking about, and so. And I might get you to kick things off because one of the ones that we want to kick things off is about travel, because travel is a big part of a lot of people's goals and aspirations. They want to see the world. So yeah, we might get things kicked off there.
Yeah, travel's a really good one. I think everyone loves to travel at the end of the day. I don't think if you give someone an option to say, would you like to travel or would you like to stay home? I don't think anyone's going to want to stay home for 12 months of the year. So traveling is a pretty common goal, but everyone's got a little bit different about where they want to do, what travel looks like, and all of those sort of things. But
what's a common question you get asked around like travel goals, or what's one of the questions you get asked?
Yeah, just being able to have a plan in place to be able to afford travel. I think money is always the big one with travel. It's money and time, getting time off work, being able to do that, but also being able to afford the trip. People want to be able to go on holidays where they can enjoy it and not have to be too concerned about a budget and how much they're going to spend. So money is the big one for holidays.
And it's always that I've found this trade-off for people that want to take holidays and do holidays. It's around, we'll get around to it when, and therefore there's this like large level of sacrifice that happens until the motion, until that moment happens. But I do find that you can sometimes kick it on year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, and then eventually it never happens. So there's this whole thing about you get stuck in your ways. So like a common question around, how do families manage having regular holidays, but not sacrificing maybe paying off their debt or, retiring when they want to. So how do they work that out?
So obviously when you're going on a holiday, you're spending money. And where else could that money could be allocated? Could be going towards debt, could be going towards savings, investments. There's so many different options where that money could go. But it's really about what do you value? And if you value holidays more than, let's say, retiring 5 years earlier, there's no right or wrong answer. And that's a common conversation that I have with my clients about, look, we don't mind about working another 5 years, but if that means we can travel every 2 years or 3 years overseas with our family, that's something that we really want to do because we're not going to get that time back.
So do you really, like, it's around mapping that out and really showing what that looks like, putting those, every couple of years going on those big holidays, retiring when you want to, seeing what it looks like.
Yeah.
Before just going in and making that kind of call where it's like, we're not having holidays for 10 years or we're only having holidays, but I'm going to retire when I'm 75. Like, don't make those assumptions. Like,
Definitely.
you can have both if you have a plan.
Yeah, and that's the most important thing. It's the planning behind the holiday. So making sure on two levels, you want to make sure on like a day-to-day cash flow, we're able to put a savings plan in place to say build up those funds for the holiday. But then on a long-term vision where we're having a look at your roadmap, making sure that, yeah, what are the effects of going on these holidays every 2 years? If we didn't do that, what does life look like? And often it's not really a huge impact, and being able to go on those holidays really works well. It's just about the planning in place and saying, okay, we're going to put X amount of dollars each month away for this big holiday that we're planning in 2 years' time. So when that time comes, we're not trying to scavenge all this money together and say, oh, how are we going to afford it? It's there. We know it's there. We've been planning ahead, and we're able to go really comfortably on this holiday. Like, I had a client of mine who really, really wanted to go on a big US trip, and it was going to cost a bit of money for them and their family, but they really wanted to do it. And we had a bit of a lead up. We had about 3 to 4 years planning for this holiday, and when they actually went on the holiday, they had more than enough money to go on the holiday for spending, for flights. They come back and there was still money left over in that holiday fund. And we said, like, guys, we've accounted for that to go on holiday. That's going towards your next holiday now. So bring in that next one forward because that money's there. And they loved that. And they were able to have a great time, not to stress about money because we forward planned for that trip.
And it's very important around where that holiday funds actually sit. And I have seen some good cases. I've seen some bad cases as well. And if you've got a goal, let's say in, I would say 5 years or less, you don't want to be putting too much risk on that money. And I have seen in the past, for example, someone wanting to go on a holiday, say in 3 years, and they're like, have a look at the stock market. Stock market's going gangbust. Let's put our holiday funds into the stock market. And then lo and behold, there's a market correction and they don't have enough funds. Therefore, they're having to either dip elsewhere or cancel their holidays. So it's very important around obviously having the plan, but when you execute on it, where's that money being held? Now, in most cases, it's going to be in like an offset account that's offsetting the mortgage, or it's going to be in a savings account. It's going to be something that creates certainty. So when you're building plans for people, how often do you maybe split the account to have a holiday fund versus allocating it in say one bucket? How do you like approaching it?
I think everyone's a little bit different with how they like to manage their banking, and there's no right or wrong way, whether you've got one big savings account for all your big savings goals, or you've got multiple savings accounts where you say, or offset accounts, and you've got one for holidays, one for education, one for car upgrades. It really depends on how you like to manage your finances. In my personally for me, I like to say, all right, I've got a main savings account, and then we've got this goal for the holidays where we're going to put X amount each fortnight into this account so that we've got enough to go on a holiday. And when that account builds up to X amount, we can start having a look at planning a trip. So I think psychologically that really helps because it doesn't feel like, oh no, we're taking money out of our savings and we feel like we're going backwards. But having that money there to say, all right, we've planned for this. We know that account's not going to be at that level forever because that's our holiday money. It really helps with the mentality of it.
And that's why that multiple offset accounts is sometimes, in most cases, our preferred option. Because of the ability to not just segregate the funds from a psychological perspective, but at the same time be able to fight down on your mortgage.
Yeah, I think multiple offset accounts are probably one of my favorite things. Offset account in general is fantastic. And if you've got a mortgage without an offset account, it's probably something that you really want to have a look at. everyone's a little bit different, but in most cases, it makes sense to have an offset account if you've got a bit of a balance in savings.
Yeah, and even just the ability to kind of save in that offset. Interest is calculated daily but paid monthly, and so just having your salaries go into these offset accounts, and for people that have money that sits outside of that offset account that's growing interest, you're also paying tax on that interest that you're paying. So it's sometimes counterintuitive. So it's really good in regards to segregation, but that's your more preferred option. Yeah, awesome. Now, moving away from travel, because travel's a big one. Another one that really comes up for families as well, besides travel, is around schooling. Yeah, around private schooling, if it be even childcare, whatnot. How do you go about preparing for that? Like, obviously it's one of the biggest costs for young families as well too. How do you go about preparing for that? And is it a similar approach? What goes on?
Well, the good thing about schooling is you've got a bit of lead up time. You know when that date's going to happen, and
assuming that you come early, assuming that you're preparing early here, yeah.
Correct. Like, let's say you're starting this from when your child's in primary school and you're planning for high school, or when they start childcare and you're planning for primary school. You've got a little bit of lead up time, and that's the most important thing with planning for schooling. I think having that lead up time where you can put a plan in place to say, okay, in 5 years' time, we're going to need an extra $5,000 a year for this school. So most of the time, perfect situation would be you've actually got that surplus cash flow at the moment and you're saving that, or you're putting that to something else. But then it's more so making that shift on where that money is allocated. So let's say, as an example, primary school, we're going to a public primary school, but high school, we want our kids to go to a private high school. In primary school, it's a bit easier to travel. Kids can take time off school. It's not too much of a hassle. It doesn't really matter too much if they're missing time off. But in high school, we want to make sure that they're there for most of the year. They're not taking time off throughout the year. So for primary school, maybe you want to travel a little bit more. But in high school, we're going to reduce those holidays, and maybe that holiday fund gets reallocated to schooling while they're at school. And then once that's done, we reallocate to holidays. Or for an example, one person in the family is working part-time, but once the kids go to high school, we're willing to have that trade-off where we're willing to work 4 days a week instead of 3 days a week to fund the extra high school cost.
And this is also really done, everyone, where you've got this landscape in front of you, where you're able to see with clarity what's happening and make those adjustments. And this is why I say it's so important for people to have this done, have their roadmap really put in front of them to understand what levers you need to pull on. And if it's to generate more income, if it's to cut back on expenses, do I need to take extra risks? And then what do I need to execute on? When it comes to education as well too, it's, is that in a separate account? Is it in the one account? Do we have a education bond that we want to set up and structure it in a particular way? Are we going to, be able to pay down our mortgage, and then we have to, take equity out to then fund it through those years because we're going to have negative? You only can make those decisions with some confidence once you have the clarity in front of you.
I think you hit the nail on the head. Planning is the most important thing. Like, without that clear plan or roadmap or actually visualizing what this looks like, what lever do we need to pull to make this happen, you don't know. And without knowing, it is so hard to get the plan right.
Well, if you're planning and then you are executing the plan, the results are going to be very closely aligned to what you've planned for. If you plan with no execution, well, nothing's going to happen. If you execute with no plan, you increase the risk. It's like every goal that you want to go for, there's this kind of dreaming aspect that becomes a goal becomes a plan, and then there's this execution or the implementation of that plan to happen. Not having those goals and dreams are just going to be fairy tales.
And that's it. And it's like, how do you want this to happen? Because if you do, it's not going to happen with you sitting there doing nothing about it. Like, if you want to make it happen, let's get up, let's make it happen. Because at the end of the day, there's so many possibilities, but it's how much do you want it, and what work are you willing to do to make it happen?
Which actually brings me on to another one that we often see, and this is the family that's private schooling's next year. Okay, so they've been in let's call it the public system, okay, and they haven't adequately planned. And They've come, they've got, $20,000 for their first child. The second child's coming in an extra 2 years from now. And they hardly have any sense to their name. How do you approach that, Anth? Like, what do you do?
It's a hard situation because, yeah, I mean, you can't go back in time. You can't fix it, but you need to make this happen. You want to make it happen. What adjustments are you willing to make? And the longer, I like to put it, the longer you leave things, the more sacrifice you're going to need to make. Because in that point, okay, what are we going to do? Are we going to take on more debt to pay for school fees, which means that that's extra payments, that's money that we need to forego from somewhere else? Are we able to reduce our expenses somewhere? Are we able to sacrifice on holidays? Are we able to increase our income? Okay, it's not all about cutting back. Sometimes there's another lever you can pull on, which is increasing your income. Okay, we've had clients in the past that I've worked with, and I've said to them, I go, guys, if you want to make this happen, if you want to buy this house, go on these holidays, have this family, you need to elevate your income. And when that happens and you get that promotion or that pay rise or that new job and you're able to then come into a little bit more money, things change drastically. And that's often the most reliable trigger, that lever to pull on is that income, because expenses can only be cut so far.
And it's interesting. A lot of people in that scenario will come and they'll say, maybe not verbalize it, but you can really feel that they're like, is there an easier way? Isn't there an investment that I can put myself in that is going to... And what happens is that people are wanting the easy road. And that's acceptable. You want to lose weight. I want a magic pill, everything in life. I just want it easy. I want it easy. But that's where all the risk is. That's where all the issues lie. And, I constantly see the latest investment trends or the latest... the way that people are trying to manage their finances. And it's crazy. It's crazy because it's probably very similar to the fitness industry. You just have to have, more calories in, less calories out, and you'll put on weight. Same as when it comes to your finances, more income in, less expenses out. The thing is that what's wrapped up in all of this is all of the complex world of your psychology, your mindset, the different goals that are out there. Also, we're in a world of information overload. I went and I was speaking at a mate's place and he's gone into AI and he's kind of built himself his own financial plan. And I said, give us a look. Let us have a look at it. Wow. Because it's come across very confidently, you could be assumed to think the answers are right. But it was actually very concerning how wrong it was. And so people in desperation are going to these sources. And like Anthony said, for that couple or for that family or whatever, it's about to get a whole lot harder because the conversation of getting it wrong is, hey, little Stuart, I told you we were going to go to that private school, or we had that, but we're not going to do that. And so there's actually a funny movie, I think it's called The House, when the girl has to go to college, she gets accepted into college, and so the parents get a gambling ring happening at their house to try and put the daughter through college. Just reminded me of that. So yeah, I think plan early as much as you can. And also, like Anth said, there's different things that happen in different stages as your kids are growing. And also as well too, once private schooling's done, there's usually this extra cash flow that comes as well. So what do you do with that? And how does that piece into your pre-retirement? It's a whole discussion piece. Another question we get asked is around, we want to upgrade our home. How do we know if now is the right time? And whether we can actually afford a bigger home. Because as the family grows, and I'm going through this at the moment, the house gets a bit small. It's a first world problem, I know, but you kind of go, hey, everyone needs their own room and whatnot. So how do you go about that?
This is probably the biggest one because you're taking on debt to make something happen. And debt, as much as you can do with debt, sometimes it can be the downfall for a lot of people without planning properly.
Well, that's the only way really that they say debt is the only way a successful investor will go broke.
And I see it. It's the people on really good incomes, but their debt levels are so high where they're not moving anywhere. And that's why, like, with buying a new home and taking on that debt, you got to be so careful. And like we said before, the planning and execution on this is super critical.
So when you say taking on too much debt, Ant, obviously there's what the bank will lend you. But what do you look for when a client's saying that they want to, like, what do you upgrade the home? What are you looking for?
Yeah, so what the bank's going to borrow you and what you can actually afford are always two different things. Okay, and people often get that a little bit confused where, oh, the bank's going to give us X amount, we're able to do this. Okay, but what I'm really looking at is a couple of things. It's number one, what is the cash flow going to look like? Are we going to be in a surplus? And then number two is, what are we left in the bank? What's in the war chest that we've got available for emergencies if something was to happen? My golden rule is, at a minimum, I always want to see 3 months worth of living expenses. Okay, anything less than that, it gives me a bit of a worry for what may happen if something was to go wrong.
And that's obviously with the adjusted repayments, yeah. And we also do like stress testing in regards to, let's say the rate is 5.5% or 6%, we'll put a couple of percent on, yeah. And so to make sure that we've got that, but like even hearing that for me, it gives me a little bit of anxiety. 3 months as a minimum. You probably wouldn't even be pushing it at 3 months, would you?
No, I mean, that's like the worst case. If you can have more than that, that's going to be a bit more comfort too.
What would you say is a comfortable level? Obviously, the more the merrier. But what would you say until you like your anxiety kind of comes down?
It sort of depends on a couple of things. It depends on how high expenses are, what debt levels you have. If you're an employee or a self-employed.
When you say debt levels, are you talking like debt to income? Like, because obviously someone who's on $500,000 a year income, $1.5 million is a very different story to someone on $100,000 trying to borrow 1.5. Yeah?
Correct. Because like the way that I have a look at it is, if you were to stop work right now for 3 months, let's say we've got a couple, husband and wife both stop work for 3 months. What happens? Is there money in the bank account that will cover expenses for 3 months? Income's gone completely, but we've got those debt repayments there. We've got eating costs, we've got bills, we've got school fees, we've got all of these costs there. Are we able to survive? And everyone's a little bit different with risk too, okay? The less money in the bank, the more risk that you're taking on. So,
and also there'd probably be a difference for you in regards to the stability of the job too. I know that when I'm looking at it, it's around the stability of the job.
100%.
Like as in, are we talking about a government worker that's been in the job, for a while, in a secure role? No one's kind of exempt from retrenchment.
But there's always more risky occupations than other.
Like if you look at a self-employed person, most self-employed people are optimistic people. They'll come in and they'll say, hey, my profit's going to be X amount of dollars. But really...
they've got the most risk.
Yeah, got the most risk. So, we kind of take off a little bit, probably go, what did they average for the last couple of years, bring that together before going, hey, listen, it's comfortable to move on that.
But also age comes into it as well. Like how young you are, or how close are you to retirement? Do you have kids that are depending on you, or are you able to drop everything and go get a job regardless if you have to work night shifts or across the city every night? Like that also forms a part there too.
And I think another one as well too is just in regards to when an assessment's done from a loan perspective, it's done with like your income now, or in some cases self-employed, what your averages of your incomes, your current debt levels and all that. But one of the things that we do, and clients absolutely love it, is because we have their roadmap and it's kind of like a live GPS. We also know in year 2, 3, 4, 5, the lumpy expenses or the increase in expenses. Like if they're currently not traveling but want to travel in 3 years, does that expose them to negative cash flow levels? Are we getting into like unfunded net cash flow, which essentially means that there's no money in cash reserves? Like that ability to have that forward-looking approach, you're stopping the accidents from happening.
And that's a really good point. Like that's what the banks don't look at. They don't have a look at, they're considering getting married next year, or they're considering having a couple of kids in a few years' time. What's going to happen in that period of time? Where are the loan repayments going to come from? So that's where we're looking around corners where the bank wouldn't even consider, because we want to make sure that it's sustainable. Okay, it's not you can pay the repayments for 1 year, but year 2, 3, and 4 are going to be really hard, guys. You're not going to be able to do anything. So having a look around those corners is super important.
Bigger house, bigger mortgage should mean much more bigger effort put in regards to planning for this. Yeah. And same as with private schooling, people don't want to pull their kids once they put them in, pull them out. So take it seriously. A lot of people make these decisions on a whim. A holiday that you should have done, yes, it's important, but you can stop the next one if you really want to. But some of these bigger decisions can be absolutely detrimental in regards to the long-term wealth for yourself, but also more importantly, the standard of living. We always talk about, numbers and wealth and whatnot, but what kind of standard of living do you want for yourself and for your family? So I want to just pivot a little bit in regards to another one that we get is around, I've got a lot of money in offsets and I've got a lot of money in savings. Should I be doing something with this? And some clients will come to us and they've got hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting in an offset account from their mortgage. And a few things I often ask is, where did you source that money from? It's a really good question. And why do I ask it? So a lot of people, especially in Australia, their equity in their properties, if they've held them for a while, has increased over time. And a part of that, they've gone and they've refinanced their mortgage, they've pulled their equity out, and they've sat their equity in their offset account. Okay. And so you've got this sometimes false sense of security that all of this money has been accumulated in this offset account from just increasing your debt. So the first question I often ask is, where is it coming from? Because technically that is really just your debt. Second question I ask is, how long has that money been sitting at that level for? Okay. Because if the offset account has been going up, down, left and right, up, down, left and right, there's no surplus cash flow. It's a clear indication for me that we need to get really into the weeds of what's going in and going out. However, the conversation usually then goes to, hey, should I be investing this money? Should I be investing? And for me, it's always around, do I need to take on the extra risk to achieve my goals and aspirations? And there's this whole, even my mate that I was talking to with the AI thing, the AI recommended a debt recycling strategy for the client. And I know Anthony's just scoffing at that because, debt recycling strategy sounds really cool. And it's some of those things that it just sounds like a really good buzzword, but you're taking on extra risk. I grab $100,000, I'm grabbing it from that offset account, or I'm splitting it first and then putting it into an investment. So I'm taking $100,000 of debt. We just talked about how debt is the thing that makes people go broke if they do it in a bad way. But I'm all of a sudden now having to pay 6%, 6.5%, whatever it is, interest rate. Now, where are we getting that? Where are we getting that extra money to? So if they've got a cash flow problem, and then all of a sudden you're trying to put things like debt recycling issues, you're just putting fuel onto the fire. So sometimes, and in a lot of cases, I find it's usually, we did refinance and we do have the extra money in there. Oh, it hasn't been moving much. Because really what I'm looking for is, number one, do we have enough in the safety net to ride out the expenses? Now, Anthony said 3 months worth of living expenses. Okay. Now you might fall off your chair, but if you've been listening to these podcasts, you'll realize I sometimes like to have 3 years in an offset account. Now, it doesn't need to be all of your money. You can, refinance that to hold. But if your expenses are $100,000 a year and you've got $300,000 sitting in your offset account, mate, you're in a good spot. You can weather the storm. Okay. So I like to have those measures in place before I start taking on risk. And even when I'm taking on that risk, I'm starting small, because another thing that people forget to realize, and especially as we're talking with young families, is your situation is rapidly changing. Rapidly. So what's right now might not be right in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. And investing is a long-term game. You're investing with the intention of holding that investment for 7, 10, 15 years and not touching it. So whatever you put into that investment, you've got to think about, I'm not touching it for 7 to 10 years. So should I put that money in there? And if the answer is like, I might need it sooner, well, you've got to question if it's appropriate. I'm sure you get that question around like, I've got all this money sitting in this offset account. What do I do with it?
Yeah, 100%. But then it also in relation to your debt too, because that money's not sitting there doing nothing. That money's sitting there helping you pay down your debt, saving you interest of, call it 6%. You're not paying any tax on that. There's very low risk on that money. And it's, okay, like what's my goals? Do I need to pay off the debt in the next 10 years? Or do I have 30 years before that needs to be paid off? And then having a look at not all, it's more so how much do I allocate to each? Not do I put all my money here or all my money there? It's about finding that right balance between different asset allocations.
And I didn't touch on it enough, but another thing that I know that Anthony really loves doing, and so do I, is also just starting small with investing, like just to build up the behavior and the habits.
Yeah.
And so, a really, really good one is linking the investment to the goal. And what I mean by that is around, hey, we want to make sure that we have a deposit for our house for our children by the time they're 21. Let's say that the kid's 2 years old. And so linking that investment, long-term time frame, starting small and just repeating that over every month, building that up over time and creating that behavior, then each year, putting a little bit more and a little bit more. But this all comes to play in this big roadmap, this big picture, making sure that everything's in tune and everything's, fluid. Yeah, so that you can move as your life is changing and different expenses are going up and bigger homes and traveling's all happening, that you've got the ability to pivot and not make disastrous issues. But it's an interesting and very kind of mind-boggling scenario that when you dive deeper into this, realizing how complex the world is, if you don't have the clarity of a roadmap in front of you.
100%. Without a plan, you've got no direction.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll wrap it up there, Anth. Thanks for jumping on. Enjoy your honeymoon. And thanks. Until next time, keep well and speak soon.
See ya.